taking photos at nightclubs almost every weekend for the past 5 years. Well, there was a little break thanks to a pesky pandemic, but otherwise, I like to think that I take some pretty decent club photos. In this video, I'd like to share a few tips with you guys that should help you out if you're interested in getting into nightclub or event photography, as they are both fairly similar and follow fairly similar principles. So, starting off with an important disclaimer though, you should actually enjoy going to nightclubs, being out and about, being out late, and being in loud environments, because if your idea of a perfect Sunday is waking up at 8 AM bright and early, taking photos at nightclubs, probably isn't for you. Firstly, I think there is two types of nightclub photography. You've got the more traditional posed look, which looks like this, which was really common a few years back and can still be found at more dressy places. And then the current trend of much more candid photography, with far less actually posed images and far more like in the moment shots like these ones. And it's important to determine what the nightclub wants before you go ahead and begin shooting. So communication is extremely important. Ask beforehand if it's a new place you're shooting at, what sort of style they're after, and they should give you a brief explaining what they're looking for. When it comes to shooting post photos of people, it's important to make sure your framing is correct. You do not want people's heads to be in the center of the image with a bunch of dead space above them, so try to capture a scene with only about 15 to 20% negative space above the head. This rule doesn't really apply for candid photos, as you're going to be shooting a lot more erratically, and as such it's hard to actually guarantee similar proportions, but you can always compensate for this in post by cropping your images in slightly to try and remove as much negative space above people's heads as you can. I find that, when you have just when it's too much in the center, it looks a bit weird. So when you arrive at the club, I like to firstly scout the place out a little bit, determine areas where there are cool elements to capture, and see if there are any unique vantage points you can take, like from behind the DJ booth or even behind the bar. Although behind the bar is probably only okay if it's not absurdly busy and you're getting in the way of the bartenders. Now for the lens choices. So I used to use a 16-35 f4 zoom lens back when I shot with Canon, and I basically always kept it at 16mm in order to get the widest field of view. But nowadays I've actually switched to the 18-1.4 WR as my main club lens. It's a 28mm full frame equivalent, and I switched to it after shooting with a Ricoh GR as a sort of a side camera for a number of years, and the club that I work at loving the more natural nature of the 28mm focal length. I find especially that when you shoot in portrait orientation, 16mm can really distort people and be super unflattering, whereas I think 28mm is a really nice focal length where everyone looks good and is wide enough to get group shots if need be. But always experiment with different focal lengths and see what works. Ultra wides are awesome if you want to capture the big moment behind the DJ booth or epic crowd shots like these ones. I've also decided against getting something like the 16-55 2.8 because I really like doing natural light shots, and any extra shots of light that I can get are much appreciated. This is also why I love the 51.0 for close-up portrait-style images of like the DJ or super candid photos of the crowd. But if you're only shooting with flash and want the flexibility, a zoom lens for sure is a good option to consider. I also have a Glimmer Glass 1 filter on my lens as well. I find that it really sort of softens the images and gives them a bit more of like a dreamy look, as well as giving you these beautiful glowing halos around bright lights, which looks really, really nice. I've actually made a video on what is in my camera bag. You can check it out for more details on the gear that I use. So for the flash options, any flash will work. I typically have it set to ETTL and usually minus 0.3 power, but yeah, it depends. Either minus 0.3 or like minus 0.7, just depends on the scene itself. And if I'm shooting in a pose style, I'll attach a little diffuser, but if it's candid, I'll just go direct flash with no diffuser. I find that this looks really, really good. I use the Godox V1 and I really, really like it for club photography. The recycle times are almost instant, the battery life is exceptional, and it produces really, really great results. But when I shot with Canon, I used the Canon 600 EX RT speed light, and that was an awesome flash. Definitely built a bit nicer than the Godox, but the Godox has superior recycle times and substantially longer battery life, even with Eneloop Pros in the Canon flash. And when it comes to camera settings, I usually keep mine at 1000 to 1250 ISO, f8, and 1/125th shutter speed, and I find that works great in terms of being able to quickly and easily get in focus, sharp images when firing as quickly as possible. For natural light, as wide open as you can go, try to keep the shutter speed above 1/60th as people are usually moving pretty quickly, and ISO as far as you can push it. So I know that when I used a Canon R6, I could confidently shoot at, I want to say 6400 ISO and have no problems, but with my XH2S, I do have to keep it below 4000 ISO, otherwise the image does start to fall apart. In terms of autofocus, I keep the focus point just slightly above center, and I have eye detect turned on. And I find that helps acquire focus quickly and accurately. But it will all depend on the camera that you're using. You absolutely do not need the latest and greatest camera to shoot good nightclub photos. So I used a old 5D Mark III for many, many years and I got great results. If you don't have eye detect, you can always half press the focus to center point and then recompose the image by moving the camera itself while the shutter remains half pressed. So when it comes to natural light images, look out for interesting lights, play with shadow, and even experiment with long exposures. The world really is your oyster when it comes to club photography, and I think you should absolutely experiment to try and get as many cool, unique photos as you can. For example, I've even used my Godox wirelessly, and I put it behind the DJ to get these really cool like eclipse images that look really, really interesting. Stand out and you will get hired again in the future, or potentially even seal the deal in getting your residency at a nightclub. And if you're finding these tips helpful, please give the video a like, it really helps me out. I just wanted to pause the video for a second and just make a really important PSA. Always make sure you're wearing earplugs when you're shooting at nightclubs. They are very, very loud places, and repeated exposure to such loud music can seriously permanently damage your ears. And hearing is one of those things where when it goes forever. So you do not want tinnitus, it's not fun. Yeah, I use these little loop earplugs, which are fairly affordable. They're really, really comfortable. I think they look quite stylish as well. And they work really, really well in terms of turning down the sound to a safe level. And you can still hear people asking you for photos and if you need to have a conversation with someone. So yeah, always wear earplugs. Very, very important. Anyway, back to the video. Now that we've covered gear and settings, let's cover the other very important part of club photography, and that is confidence. You need to be confident to come up to people and ask if they'd like their photo taken. And don't be scared of rejection. If they say no, just say no worries and move on. Do not try to sneakily take a photo of them while they're not looking, because that is not very nice. When I first started shooting events and nightclubs, I was absolutely petrified of asking people if they wanted their photo taken. My fear of rejection was just way too high. But after practice and just going for it, now it's second nature for me, and it doesn't really bother me in the slightest. Maybe have a few drinks. That can also help you out in terms of calming your nerves if you're scared to ask people. Next up, try to get involved with the night itself. Enjoy yourself. Don't be antisocial, bored in the corner on your phone. Get amongst a party and chat with people, and in general, do not be weird. This will allow you to get great images, and you also will have a hell of a lot more fun. I like to show people the photo that I just took of them as well, especially girls. And if they ask to take another one, just go ahead and do it. I find it odd how quite a few club photographers don't actually do this, but I think that really enhances the trust people have in you, because they can see the end result on your camera rather than you just being this mysterious stranger snapping photos of them like a paparazzi. You know, if you get harassed by patrons, always keep your cool. Remain level-headed, and if they're really bothering you, tell security. They will be able to eject them from the venue without any issues. But I would say that if you're prone to getting upset because someone grabbed you or is being a nuisance, you'll need to have slightly thicker skin. Otherwise, club photography just is not for you. Remember, most people are usually fairly intoxicated, so if you have no experience dealing with this, it can be challenging at first. Lastly, and look, this is a pretty important one, but stay away from lasers. If you notice a club has lasers active, you can always ask the lighting technician to see if they can turn them off while you take photos, or just be very, very careful, because a laser hitting your camera sensor will fry it and it will destroy it. I have frequently asked for lasers to be turned off at events for the duration that I'm shooting, and I've had no issues. If they complain, explain you're not risking your camera. They will almost always oblige after that. Usually speaking though, most nightclubs are aware of this, and lasers are typically above eye level. So as long as you aren't purposely trying to stick your camera in the way of said lasers, you should be alright. I think it's only maybe like a rave where you might have problems. But yeah, I would recommend getting photographer insurance as well if you intend to do this frequently, as anything can happen. This is another reason why I think it's really important to have a weather resistant camera body, because the amount of times that people might accidentally spill a drink on you is, yeah, it's quite common. So definitely have something that has some decent weather sealing, and pray to God that it's not a vodka raspberry, because otherwise it's going to be a sticky situation. I hope these tips have helped you out, and if you'd like to see a video detailing how I go about editing my club photos and tips on how you can actually get into shooting club photos, let me know and I'll be sure to make them in the future, and also be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.